You pull the door shut. The latch clicks. You stand on the other side for a second, keys in hand, and you tell yourself it's fine. You've done this 1,000 times. You walk to your car, back out of the driveway, and that's it, you're gone. For the next 8 hours, you'll think about it maybe twice. Once when something reminds you of your dog's face, and once when you feel a small, ambient guilt you can't quite locate. Now someone put a camera in that living room, and what it captured in the next 3 minutes, just the first 3 minutes after that door clicked shut, is not what you imagined. It's not peaceful. It's not your dog flopping onto the couch and sighing. In some cases, it looked like something closer to grief. But here's what's strange. When researchers started studying that footage, not casually, but scientifically, frame by frame, with cortisol tests and behavioral coding, what they found wasn't what the grief narrative predicted either. What your dog is doing while you're gone is more complicated than sadness. And understanding it will change how you read every single moment of your dog's day. Before we go any further, if you've ever stood on the other side of a closed door and felt guilty, this video is for you. And if it opens something up, if it changes how you see what's happening in that living room while you're gone, hit like before you leave. Because it tells me this kind of science is worth spending weeks on. Subscribe if you want to keep understanding the animal that chose you. Now, let's look at what the cameras actually found. There are 2 stories most people tell themselves about what their dog does when they leave. The first story is the optimistic one. Your dog is fine. Dogs sleep 12 to 14 hours a day anyway. They probably just lay down, closed their eyes, and waited. No suffering. No drama. Just a long, peaceful nap until the sound of your car in the driveway. The second story is the guilty one. Your dog is devastated. Waiting by the door the entire time. Maybe crying. Probably staring at the spot where you stood. This is the story that follows you to work, that makes you check the clock at 2 p.m. and feel a low-grade ache. Both of these stories are incomplete. And the truth, the one that comes from cameras and cortisol swabs and behavioral scoring rubrics, sits in a place most people haven't considered. There's a study from 2011 that begins to answer this. And the methodology is specific enough that you'll want to sit with it. In 2011, researchers Linda Wren and Linda Keeling at Uppsala University in Sweden published a study in the journal Applied Animal Behavior Science. They recruited 12 dogs and their owners, set up cameras in the home, and then had owners leave for 3 different durations: 30 minutes, 2 hours, and 4 hours. The dogs were filmed continuously. Their behavior was then coded in intervals, what they were doing, whether they were vocalizing, pacing, or resting, and those behavioral scores were mapped against the duration of the absence. What the cameras captured in the first 3 minutes was consistent across almost every dog in the study. Vocalization. Door-oriented behavior, meaning the dog physically stationed itself near the exit point. Pacing in patterns that repeated. These weren't random movements. They were searching behaviors. The dogs weren't confused. They were looking. Here is the number that matters. The acute distress behaviors, the pacing, the whining, the door fixation, typically peaked within the first 3 minutes of the owner's departure, then began to subside. By the 30-minute mark, the majority of dogs had shifted into a lower arousal state. But here's the part that complicates the "they're totally fine" story. Wren and Keeling also found that the intensity of the greeting behavior when owners returned was significantly higher after the 2-hour absence than after the 30-minute one. The dogs weren't simply measuring time. Something was accumulating. The reunion response scaled with the absence, which means something was being held, some internal state that didn't fully discharge while you were gone. Think about what your dog does when you come home after a long day. The spinning, the vocalizing, the way they press into your legs like they're trying to confirm you're solid. That's not just happiness. That's the release of something that's been quietly held for hours. But that's only the first layer, because the cameras told us what the behavior looked like. What was happening inside the body is a different story entirely. In 2010, a research team led by Clara Palestrini at the University of Milan published a study in the Journal of Veterinary Behavior that went further than behavioral observation. They measured cortisol, the primary stress hormone, in dogs during simulated owner absences, and they correlated cortisol levels with specific behavioral signals captured on video. What they found was that cortisol elevation began before the acute behavioral distress even peaked. The physiological stress response wasn't a reaction to being alone. It was anticipatory. Dogs who showed early signs of owner departure preparation, watching you put on your coat, hearing you pick up your keys, were already mounting a hormonal response before the door closed. Your dog isn't just sad that you left. Your dog begins processing your departure while you're still in the room. Now pair that with something from evolutionary biology, and the picture gets sharper. In 2010, Monique Udall and her colleagues at the University of Florida published a study in the journal Learning and Behavior comparing how dogs and wolves respond to human social cues. Specifically, cues that signal availability and attention. The wolves, even those raised in human homes, showed far lower sensitivity to human gaze, human pointing, and human departure signals than domestic dogs did. Dogs, by contrast, were exquisitely calibrated to human behavioral cues, more so than their wolf ancestors, and more so than any other animal tested in equivalent paradigms. What Udall's team was documenting wasn't a trained behavior. It was the result of roughly 15,000 years of selective pressure. Dogs that attended closely to humans, that tracked their movements, read their moods, anticipated their departures, survived and reproduced at higher rates. The dog who knew you were leaving before you left was better positioned to stay close, stay useful, stay bonded. What looks like anxiety in your kitchen every morning when you reach for your keys is, in evolutionary terms, a finely tuned survival mechanism. You didn't create that sensitivity. You inherited it. There's a study from 1998 that takes this further, and into territory that genuinely unsettled some researchers when it was first published. József Topol and his team at the Hungarian Academy of Sciences ran a series of experiments modeled on the strange situation paradigm. The same protocol developmental psychologists used to classify attachment patterns in human infants. They placed dogs with their owners in an unfamiliar room, introduced a stranger, and then had the owner leave. They measured how much the dogs explored, how they responded to the stranger, and, critically, how they reacted when the owner returned. The results mapped almost perfectly onto human-infant attachment patterns. Dogs with secure attachment explored more freely when the owner was present, became distressed when the owner left, calmed when the owner returned, and used the stranger as a poor substitute, interacting less, seeking less comfort. The classification system developed for 18-month-old children transferred, almost intact, to adult dogs. Your dog doesn't relate to you the way it relates to any other human. It relates to you the way a child relates to a parent. Not metaphorically, neurologically, behaviorally, in ways that are now measurable and documented. And here's where it gets really interesting, because not all dogs experience this equally. And that difference has everything to do with you. In 2011, Veronika Konak and her colleagues at Evolutionary University in Budapest published a study in applied animal behavior science examining what they called attachment style variants in dogs. They were specifically asking, why do some dogs fall apart when their owner leaves while others stay relatively settled? What predicts the difference? They found two primary variables. The first was the dog's individual history, early socialization, prior experiences of unpredictable separation, whether departure had historically been followed by long, unreliable return windows. Dogs with more chaotic or unpredictable early environments showed more anxious attachment profiles. This is the piece most trainers already know. But the second variable was less expected. The study found that dogs whose owners engaged in what the researchers described as highly owner-focused interactive play, meaning the human was an active, responsive participant, not just present, developed more secure attachment patterns. The interaction quality mattered more than interaction quantity. An owner who plays with deep engagement for 20 minutes produces a more securely attached dog than an owner who is simply present in the house for 8 hours. What this means practically, the most powerful thing you can do for a dog that struggles when you leave isn't changing what happens during the absence. It's what happens before you leave and when you come back. Not long goodbyes. Those actually increase cortisol elevation in dogs that are already tracking departure signals. What the research supports is calm, connected interaction in the period before departure, a low-key exit, and a warm but controlled reunion. Not ignoring your dog when you come home. That old advice is not what the data supports. But not a frantic, high-arousal greeting either. Greet calmly. Let the reunion be warm and present, not explosive. The dog needs to learn that your return is reliable and safe, not a cause for overwhelming relief. The distinction that matters most, and this is the one the cameras helped clarify, is the difference between a dog experiencing normal separation adjustment and a dog experiencing clinical separation distress. Normal adjustment looks like peak distress in the first 3 minutes, gradual settling into rest or low-level activity, behavioral rebound at reunion. Clinical separation distress looks like sustained vocalization past the 20-minute mark, destructive behavior that escalates rather than fades, physiological signs that don't resolve, elimination accidents in dogs that are otherwise housebroken. If what your camera captures is a dog who settles into sleep by the 30-minute mark, you are watching normal bonding behavior, not suffering. If what you're watching is a dog who cannot stop, who circles and cries and destroys for hours, that dog needs more than behavioral adjustment. That dog needs structured desensitization work and often veterinary support. But for most dogs, what the cameras show is something else entirely. Something that took researchers a while to name correctly. Here is what the footage actually shows once you know how to read it. Your dog paces for 3 minutes, vocalizes, sits by the door, and then, somewhere around the 20 to 25-minute mark in most studies, it moves. Not to the couch, not to its bed, to the place in the house where your scent is strongest. Your chair, your side of the bed, the pile of laundry you left on the floor that you've been meaning to deal with for a week. It circles, it lies down, it exhales, and it waits. Not in panic, not in grief, in something the researchers don't have a clean word for, but that every dog owner recognizes the moment they see it on the footage. Matthew Hennessy and his team at Wright State University documented cortisol profiles in dogs during isolation and found that even dogs with elevated baseline stress hormones showed a significant reduction in physiological arousal once they had access to a familiar scent. The smell of you doesn't just comfort your dog. It regulates your dog at a hormonal level. It is, in the most literal biological sense, medicine. Your dog isn't waiting for you to come back. Your dog is carrying you with it. In the scent of your jacket, the warmth of your side of the bed, the accumulated presence of you that lives in every corner of the home you've built together. 15,000 years ago, a dog's ancestors made a choice that no other species made at the same scale or with the same consequence. They moved toward humans, not because they were forced to. The fossil record suggests it was gradual, voluntary, bidirectional. They learned to read our faces. We learned to read theirs. They gave up the pack. We gave up some of our solitude. And what emerged from that exchange? What walks to your door when you've been gone too long? What exhales into your lap at the end of a hard day? What lies on your smell while you're away because it's the closest thing to you that it has, is not a simple creature with simple feelings. It is an animal that reorganized its entire social and neurological architecture around the possibility of you. The cameras didn't capture a dog falling apart. They captured a dog doing the only thing it knows how to do when the center of its world goes quiet. Holding on. Your dog is not suffering because something went wrong in how you raised it. It's experiencing the entirely logical consequence of having bonded, completely and without reservation, to another living thing. That's not a problem to fix. That's the whole point. If you want to keep understanding the science behind what your dog is actually experiencing, the research that sits underneath the behaviors you see every day, subscribing means you won't miss what's coming next. One question before you go. When you come home, where does your dog go first? The door, your legs, a specific room? Tell me in the comments. The pattern you describe might be more meaningful than you think. Next time, we're looking at something your dog does every single night that most owners have never questioned. Where your dog chooses to sleep, and who it sleeps near, turns out to be one of the clearest windows into how it actually ranks the relationships in your household. The research behind it is stranger and more specific than anyone expected.